The Great Council Chamber floated in the void between stars, a massive station where the galaxy's oldest civilizations gathered to discuss matters of war and peace. Today, the chamber hummed with confused voices from 100 different species. At the center of it all stood Ambassador Zixthar, his four eyes blinking in frustration as he tried to explain the human problem. "They have rejected our offer again," Zixthar announced, his translator device converting his clicks and whistles into standard galactic speech. "This is the third peace treaty the humans have refused. The Krillian Empire offers them everything: territory, resources, even favorable trade agreements. Yet they continue to fight." The council members shifted in their seats or on their perches or in their fluid tanks depending on their biology. This made no sense to any of them. War was supposed to be about calculation. You fought until the cost became too high, then you negotiated. That was how civilized species behaved. "How long has this war lasted?" asked Representative Thola, a crystalline being whose voice chimed like bells. 40 years, Zixthar replied. "By galactic standards, it should have ended decades ago. The humans have lost millions of their people. Their fleet is barely holding together. Their colony worlds bear scars that will take centuries to heal. Yet they refuse every attempt at peace." A murmur ran through the chamber. 40 years was a long time, even for species that lived for centuries. For humans who barely lived 100 years, it represented nearly half a lifetime. Why would they continue? "Perhaps they are winning?" suggested Ambassador Krill, whose species had started this whole mess by attacking human space in the first place. "Perhaps they see victory within reach and want to press their advantage." Zixthar's tentacles writhed, a sign of disagreement among his people. "That is the strange part. They are winning, yes. Their tactics are brutal and effective. But winning costs them dearly. Every battle leaves their ships damaged, their soldiers dead, their economy strained. A rational species would accept peace and rebuild." He activated a holographic display that showed the current state of the war. The human territory glowed blue, while Krillian space showed in red. The border between them was a jagged line of contested systems, each one marked with symbols indicating recent battles. "Look at this," Zixthar continued, zooming in on a particular system. 3 months ago, humans fought for this world. They lost 20 ships and 15,000 soldiers taking it. The Krillians offered to cede it to them peacefully in the last treaty. The humans said no and took it by force instead. "Madness," whispered someone in the back of the chamber. "Or something else," said Thola. "Have we studied their culture? Their history? Perhaps they have reasons we do not understand." Zixthar pulled up another display, this one showing human cities, human art, human literature. "That is what makes this so confusing. Look at their culture. They build monuments to peace. Their children learn cooperation from birth. Their entertainment shows heroes who avoid violence when possible. They have hundreds of words in their languages for peace, harmony, and coexistence." The images shifted, showing human military operations. The contrast was stark. The same species that wrote poetry about peace fought with a ferocity that shocked even the most warlike galactic races. "We intercepted their military communications," Zixthar said quietly. "They plan their operations with cold efficiency. They use weapons we banned centuries ago. They fight in ways that make our veterans wake up screaming. Yet when we speak to individual human soldiers, they talk about their families, their hopes for peace, their dreams of going home." "I have seen this before," spoke Elder Vrath, one of the oldest beings in the council. His species had been traveling the stars when most others were still in caves. There was another race long ago that fought beyond all logic. They are extinct now. They destroyed themselves rather than accept any compromise. A chill ran through the chamber. Was this humanity's fate? Would they fight until nothing remained? "What do they want?" asked Krill. "There must be something. Every species wants something. That is what we need to discover," Zixthar said firmly. "I propose we send a delegation to Earth itself. Not to negotiate, they have made clear they will not negotiate with us, but to understand. To learn what drives them, because if we do not understand the humans soon, they may become the greatest threat this galaxy has ever known." The council debated for hours. Some argued that humanity should be left alone to exhaust itself. Others suggested military intervention to force peace. But in the end, curiosity and fear won out. They needed to understand what made humans refuse peace. "Very well," announced the council speaker, a being of pure energy contained in a shimmering field. Ambassador Zixthar, you will lead a delegation to Earth. You will have access to human society, human records, human minds if they permit it. Find out why they fight, find out what they want, and find out if we should fear them. Zixthar bowed his acknowledgement. As the council session ended and the delegates filed out, he stared at the holographic image of Earth rotating slowly in the display. The small blue world looked peaceful from space, but he knew that appearances could deceive. Somewhere on that planet, humans were making decisions that baffled the entire galaxy. They were refusing peace while claiming to love it. They were dying by the millions while fighting for something they would not name. Zixthar needed to know what that something was. The fate of the galaxy might depend on it. The human city of Geneva sprawled beneath the delegation shuttle as they descended through Earth's atmosphere. Zixthar pressed his face against the viewing port, watching the buildings grow larger. He had visited 100 worlds, but Earth felt different somehow. Perhaps it was knowing that these peaceful-looking streets had sent forth warriors who fought without mercy. The shuttle landed on a diplomatic platform, and humans in formal clothing greeted them. The humans smiled, which Zixthar had learned was a gesture of welcome, though it still looked aggressive to him, all those teeth showing. The lead human, a woman named Sarah Chen, extended her hand. "Welcome to Earth, Ambassador," she said. "We hope your stay will be enlightening." Zixthar touched her hand briefly, mimicking the human greeting ritual. "We hope so as well. Your people are a mystery to us." Sarah's smile changed, becoming something sadder. "Yes, I imagine we are." Over the following weeks, the delegation toured human society with unprecedented access. They visited schools where children learned mathematics and history. They walked through museums filled with art celebrating peace and cooperation. They attended concerts where humans created beautiful sounds together. "This does not match their military behavior," noted Dr. Kovalix, the delegation's chief xenopsychologist. She was a telepathic species. Though she had promised not to read human minds without permission, these people genuinely value peace. This is not deception. Then why do they fight? Zixthar wondered aloud. They got no answers in the cities. So they visited military bases. The contrast was jarring. One day they stood in a kindergarten watching children share toys. The next day they stood in a command center watching officers plan an assault that would cost thousands of lives. Admiral Jackson met them in his office, a stern human male with gray hair and tired eyes. Behind him hung pictures of ships, battles, and a younger version of himself smiling with his family. "You want to know why we fight?" Jackson said after the translator finished explaining their questions. "Let me show you something." He pulled up a holographic star map, similar to what they had seen in the council chamber. But this one showed something different. Small markers dotted throughout human space, each one representing something specific. "These are memorial sites," Jackson explained. "Each one marks a place where Krillian forces attacked civilian targets. Not military bases, not fleet positions, civilians." He pointed to one marker. This was New Haven Colony. Population 2 million. Krillian ships bombarded it from orbit for 3 days, 98% casualties. Zixthar felt his skin color shift, a sign of distress. "We were told this was a military conflict." "It started as one," Jackson agreed. "We fought over a border dispute. Normal war things, fleet engagements, strategic targets. Then the Krillians decided to try breaking our will." He pulled up images that made even the hardened delegates turn away. They targeted hospitals, refugee ships, agricultural worlds that had no defenses. "They wanted us to surrender quickly. And you did not," Zixthar said softly. "No, we did not." Jackson's voice was flat, emotionless, but his hands gripped the edge of his desk until his knuckles turned white. "Every peace offer they have sent us has one thing in common. They ask us to forget, to move on, to return to how things were before. They offer us worlds and wealth and trade agreements, but they never offer justice." Dr. Kovalix leaned forward. "Explain justice." "This word translates poorly." Jackson thought for a moment. "It means that actions have consequences. It means that those who do wrong must answer for it. The Krillians killed millions of our civilians deliberately, not as accidents of war but as policy, and they want us to just accept peace and pretend it never happened." "You want revenge," Zixthar said, understanding dawning. "No." Jackson shook his head firmly. "Revenge would be doing to them what they did to us. We want accountability. We want the beings who gave those orders to stand trial. We want the truth recorded so it never happens again. We want the Krillians to admit what they did and face consequences. The delegation visited more places. They spoke to human soldiers who showed them pictures of children who would never grow up. They met survivors who still woke screaming from memories of attacks. They reviewed military doctrine that emphasized protecting civilian populations, even enemy civilians. One young soldier, barely 20 years old, explained it simply. My grandmother always said that peace without justice is just waiting for the next war. The Krillians need to understand they cannot do what they did and walk away clean. If we accept peace now, what message does that send? That killing civilians is fine as long as you offer enough money afterward? Zixthar spent his evenings reviewing data, trying to make sense of it all. Most galactic species did not think this way. Bhavasva. You fought, you died, you made peace, you moved on. Holding individuals accountable was unusual. Most species blamed entire civilizations or no one at all. But humans were different. They separated the people from their government. They separated soldiers following orders from leaders giving orders. They had complex rules about war, about what was acceptable and what was criminal. They truly mean it, Dr. Kovalik said one evening as they reviewed their findings. This is not posturing or negotiation tactics. They will fight forever if necessary. Over a principle, Zixthar marveled. They will sacrifice generations of their people for an abstract concept. Not abstract to them, she corrected. To them, it is as real as gravity. The final piece fell into place when Zixthar accessed the classified archives that humans had finally granted them permission to view. There he found detailed records of Krillian war crimes, documented with the meticulous care humans applied to everything. Testimony from thousands of witnesses, video recordings, communications intercepts showing Krillian commanders laughing about civilian casualties. He also found something else, copies of the peace offers the Krillians had sent. Every single one offered material compensation. Not one mentioned trials. Not one acknowledged wrongdoing. Not one named names. Zixthar sat back, his tentacles drooping. The galaxy had been negotiating with the wrong species all along. Zixthar stood alone in the archive room, surrounded by more evidence of atrocities than he had seen in his entire diplomatic career. The humans had given him complete access, holding nothing back. Perhaps they wanted the galaxy to know. Perhaps they wanted someone else to bear witness. He scrolled through incident after incident. The patterns became clear quickly. The Krillian Empire had not stumbled into war crimes by accident or heat of battle. Their attacks on civilians had been systematic, planned and approved at the highest levels of their government. The first major incident happened 8 months into the war. A Krillian admiral named Thrucknall had sent a message to his fleet that human intelligence had intercepted. Zixthar played the recording, hearing Thrucknall's clicking voice through the translator. The humans are weak because they care about individuals. They mourn their dead. They protect their civilians. This is their weakness. Strike at their soft targets and they will collapse. The strategy had seemed logical to the Krillians. Most galactic species did calculate casualties versus benefits. Hit them hard enough in vulnerable places and they would surrender. It was basic military doctrine, but the Krillians had not understood humans at all. Zixthar pulled up the records from the New Haven colony massacre. The details made him physically ill. Krillian ships had arrived at the agricultural world and demanded immediate surrender. When the colonists tried to evacuate, the Krillians had fired on the refugee ships. Then they had systematically destroyed the colony from orbit over 3 days. The Krillians had broadcast their attack on human communication networks, expecting terror and capitulation. Instead, they got fury. Human fleets that had been planning cautious maneuvers suddenly launched desperate attacks. Human colonies that had been considering surrender instead armed themselves and fought to the last person. We made them worse, Zixthar whispered to himself. The Krillians had poked a sleeping predator and awakened something terrible. He found interview recordings with Krillian prisoners of war. Most were ordinary soldiers who had not questioned their orders, but some had been present at the civilian attacks. A few had even participated willingly. One recording showed a Krillian officer being questioned by human investigators. The human asking questions remained calm, professional, but Zixthar could see the tension in his shoulders. Why did you target the hospital? The human asked. The Krillian officer shrugged as much as his anatomy allowed. They were resources supporting the human war effort. Medical personnel supplies, legitimate targets. The patients were children, sick children who could not fight. Future soldiers, future breeders. The Admiral said removing them would demoralize the sector. And you agreed with this assessment? I follow orders. That is what soldiers do. The human investigator had paused then, and when he spoke again, his voice was colder. There are orders that should not be followed. You will learn this. Zixthar found records of similar conversations repeated hundreds of times. The Krillians genuinely did not understand what they had done wrong. To them, enemies were enemies. You destroyed them efficiently. The concept that some targets should be protected even during war seemed alien and weak to them, but there were other recordings too. Messages between Krillian commanders that showed they knew exactly what they were doing. One exchange between Admiral Throcknall and another officer was particularly damning. The humans protest our tactics, the other officer had said. They claim we violate their rules of war. Let them protest, Throcknall had replied. Rules are for species that can enforce them. Once we win, who will remember their complaints? History is written by victors. Zixthar felt a cold certainty settle over him. This was not ignorance. This was not cultural misunderstanding. The Krillian leadership had known their actions were wrong by human standards and had not cared. They had gambled that humans would break before they had to answer for it. They had gambled wrong. He pulled up the peace treaty offers again, reading them with new understanding. Each one offered compensation measured in territory, resources, and trade rights. Each one proposed a return to pre-war status with some adjustments in humanity's favor. Each one included clauses about mutual forgiveness and moving forward. Not one mentioned Admiral Throcknall by name. Not one proposed accountability for the hospital bombings, the refugee ship attacks, or the systematic targeting of civilians. The Krillians wanted to buy peace with things they could afford to lose, while keeping the people who had ordered atrocities safe and powerful. Zixthar understood now why humans kept fighting. It was not about the cost in lives or resources. It was not about territory or strategic advantage. It was about something humans called precedent. If the Krillians could slaughter civilians and then negotiate their way out of consequences, what would stop the next aggressor? What would protect the next set of innocent victims? Humans were not fighting this war just for themselves. They were fighting it for every future war, sending a message to the galaxy. There are lines you cannot cross without consequence. There are crimes that wealth and power cannot erase. Dr. Kavalix found him hours later, still sitting among the records. You have been here all day, she said softly. What have you found? The truth, Zixthar replied. The Krillians started this war with an attack on a military outpost. That part they reported correctly. What they did not report was everything that came after. They made deliberate choices to target civilians, to cause maximum suffering, to break human will through terror. Many species have done similar things in war, Kavalix noted carefully. Yes, but most stop when they realize it is not working. The Krillians continued for years, and now they want to escape justice by offering material compensation. Zixthar's tentacles curled tight. The humans are right. This cannot stand. The Council will not want to hear this, Kavalix warned. It complicates things. It means the war is justified. The war was always justified, Zixthar said. We just did not want to admit it because it means confronting uncomfortable truths about how we have all conducted warfare. He stood up, his decision made. The galaxy needed to know what the Krillians had done. More importantly, the galaxy needed to understand that humans were not refusing peace. They were refusing impunity. There was a difference, and that difference mattered more than anything. The emergency session of the Galactic Council erupted into chaos the moment Zixthar finished his presentation. Delegates argued, shouted, and in one case physically attacked another council member. The speaker struggled to restore order as the evidence Zixthar had brought from Earth played on every screen in the chamber. This changes nothing, declared Ambassador Krill, his voice amplified over the noise. War is war. Civilians die. This is tragic but not unusual. It is not about civilians dying by accident, Zixthar countered, his translator barely keeping up with his agitated clicks. It is about deliberate targeting as official policy. The Krillians made civilian suffering their primary strategy. Representative Thola's crystalline form flickered with distress. Even so, continuing this war serves no purpose. The Krillians have offered generous terms. Is human pride worth more bloodshed? It is not pride, Dr. Kavalix interjected. It is principle. Humans have a concept they call justice. It requires that those who commit certain acts face consequences. Without this, they believe there can be no real peace. Elder Vrath spoke from his position at the council's highest tier. I have lived through 14 wars. In each one, we calculated costs and benefits, then made peace when the numbers no longer favored fighting. This is how civilized beings behave. What humans propose is emotional, inefficient, and dangerous. Dangerous to whom? Asked a small voice from the back. A delegate from one of the younger species, barely a century into space travel, stood hesitantly. Forgive my ignorance, but if powerful species can do terrible things and then simply negotiate away the consequences, are the rest of us not in danger? Silence fell across the chamber. It was a question most had not wanted to ask. The speaker finally restored order and announced that the human delegation had requested permission to address the council directly. This was unusual. Humans were not members, merely observers. But given the circumstances, permission was granted. Ambassador Sarah Chen entered the chamber with two others. She walked to the center platform, her small human frame dwarfed by the massive space around her. But when she spoke, her voice carried clearly. Members of the Galactic Council, thank you for hearing us. I will be brief because we know you value efficiency. Humanity has one demand for peace with the Krillian Empire: accountability. She activated her own display, showing a list of names. These 847 individuals gave orders that resulted in the systematic murder of civilian populations. They planned these attacks. They approved these attacks. They celebrated these attacks. We want them to face trial in a neutral court, under galactic law, for war crimes. Ambassador Krill's voice dripped with contempt. You would extend this war, costing thousands more lives on both sides, to prosecute individuals? This is madness. Sarah turned to face him directly. Is it madness to insist that actions have consequences? Is it madness to establish that there are lines that cannot be crossed? Your species was lucky. You have never been the victims of such attacks, but others in this council have. And they remain silent because this is how the galaxy works. The powerful do as they wish and the weak suffer. We are not weak, Krill snapped. No, you are strong, which makes what you did worse, not better. You chose to use your strength against those who could not defend themselves. You targeted children, hospitals, and refugees not because they threatened you, but because it was easy and you thought it would work. More delegates spoke up, some supporting humanity's position, others opposing it. The arguments went in circles for hours. Some species argued that pursuing individual accountability in war was impractical. Others pointed out that by existing galactic law, the Krillian actions were barely violations at all. Most species did not extend the same protections to enemy populations that humans demanded. Perhaps that is the problem, Sarah said quietly when there was a lull in the debate. Perhaps galactic law needs to change, because if it does not, if any species can do what the Krillians did and face no consequences beyond paying compensation, then war will never end. There will always be another aggressor willing to gamble that their terror tactics will work. And if they do not? Asked Elder Vrath. What happens when a species refuses to surrender its leaders for trial? You will fight forever? If necessary, Sarah confirmed. We did not start this war. We did not want this war. But now that we are in it, we will finish it properly or not at all. There are some things more important than peace. The holographic image of Krillian Emperor Zaxtal appeared suddenly in the chamber, his presence unannounced but impossible to ignore. He was massive even by Krillian standards, his armored carapace scarred from a dozen wars. I have heard enough, the Emperor declared. Humans are insects playing at civilization. You speak of justice and accountability, as if you have the power to demand such things. You do not. The Empire will never submit to your humiliation. We will never hand over our military leaders to satisfy your primitive sense of morality. Sarah met his gaze through the hologram without flinching. Then the war continues. So be it. We will crush you eventually. Your species is small, your resources limited. Time favors the Empire. Time favors those who can endure, Sarah replied. We can endure longer than you think. The question is whether your people can endure. How many more of them will die for your pride? The Emperor's mandibles clicked in what might have been laughter. My people understand duty and sacrifice. They will fight as long as necessary. Then we will see who breaks first. The hologram vanished. The chamber sat in stunned silence. The Krillians had made their position clear. War would continue until one side could no longer fight. The council voted on whether to intervene. Most species abstained, not wanting to take sides. A handful supported humanity's position in principle but offered no material help. None opposed it strongly enough to actually do anything. Sarah thanked the council and prepared to leave. As she walked toward the exit, Elder Vrath called out to her. "You condemn many more to death with your stubbornness," Sarah paused. "No, Elder. The Krillians condemned them when they chose to target civilians. We are simply ensuring they face the consequences of that choice. Every death from this point forward is on them, not us. They can end this war tomorrow by doing what is right." She left the chamber. The delegates sat quietly contemplating the future. War would continue perhaps for years more. The humans would fight until justice was served or they were destroyed. Zixthar watched the humans leave and felt something he had not expected: hope. The galaxy had been stagnant for so long, operating under rules that favored the powerful and ignored the suffering of the weak. Perhaps humans would lose this war, but perhaps, just perhaps, they would change something fundamental about how the galaxy worked. 2 months later, reports came in. The human fleet had arrived at Krillian Prime, the Empire's homeworld. But they were not alone. The human fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel in perfect formation above Krillian Prime. 200 warships, battered and patched from 40 years of fighting, but still formidable. Admiral Jackson stood on the bridge of the flagship, watching the Krillian homeworld rotate slowly beneath them. But the humans were not alone. Beside the human fleet hung ships from a dozen other species. Some were military vessels, others were observation ships, and a few belonged to actual Galactic Council members who had quietly decided that humanity's cause was worth supporting, even if their governments officially remained neutral. Zixthar was aboard one of those ships. He watched as the human admiral opened a channel that broadcast across every frequency the Krillians used. "People of the Krillian Empire." Jackson's voice was calm, almost gentle. "We have not come to destroy your world. We have not come for revenge. We have come for justice. Surrender the 847 individuals responsible for war crimes against humanity. And this war ends today. Refuse, and we begin a siege that will last until your government collapses or surrenders. The choice is yours." The Krillian government's response was immediate and defiant. Emperor Zaxtal appeared on every screen, his massive form imposing even through holographic transmission. "The Empire does not negotiate with insects. Our defense fleet will destroy you. Every citizen of Krillia will fight to the last before we submit to your demands." But something unexpected happened. The Krillian defense fleet did not immediately attack. Ships that should have been moving into position remained still. Communications channels lit up with encrypted messages that human intelligence worked frantically to decode. On the surface of Krillian Prime, something was shifting. The younger officers, the ones who had been fighting this war for decades while their leaders remained safe and comfortable, were tired. They had watched friends die for a war that should have ended years ago. They had fought bravely, but for what? So that old men who had ordered atrocities could avoid facing consequences? Commander Vexlar had been 12 years old when the war started. Now he was over 50, his carapace scarred from a dozen battles. He stood in a command bunker beneath the capital city, surrounded by officers who shared his exhaustion. "The Emperor will let us all die before he admits wrongdoing," Vexlar said quietly. "Our children will inherit this war, and their children after them, unless we do something." "You speak of treason," another officer warned. "I speak of survival, of sanity. The humans have proven they will never stop. We cannot win this war, we can only extend it. And for what? To protect 800 individuals who should never have given those orders in the first place?" The decision spread through the Krillian military like wildfire. Not all agreed, but enough did. 3 days after the human fleet arrived, a Krillian military transport left the surface under flag of truce. It docked with the human flagship, and Commander Vexlar personally delivered 847 Krillian officials into human custody. Emperor Zaxtal's reign ended that day, not through battle but through mutiny. His own military had decided that peace was more important than his pride. The trials began a month later, broadcast live across the entire galaxy. The humans had insisted on transparency. This was not revenge, it was justice. And justice required witnesses. Zixthar attended every day of the trials, watching as human prosecutors presented evidence with meticulous care. Each defendant received legal representation, Each charge was proven beyond doubt with documentation, recordings, and testimony. The proceedings were fair, sometimes frustratingly so, as humans bent over backward to ensure that no one could claim the trials were mere victor's justice. Some defendants were found guilty of the most severe crimes. These received death sentences, carried out quickly and without cruelty. Others were found guilty of lesser charges and received prison terms. Many were acquitted when the evidence did not support the charges against them. The galaxy watched, fascinated and disturbed. Most species had never seen anything like this. Individual accountability for actions in war, measured and proportional consequences, mercy mixed with justice. Admiral Thrucknall, the architect of the civilian targeting strategy, stood before the court on the final day. He showed no remorse even when confronted with videos of the suffering he had caused. "I did what was necessary to win," he stated. "That is what commanders do." "No," the human judge replied. "That is what war criminals do. True commanders protect the innocent even when it is difficult. They maintain honor even in the depths of war. You chose the easy path of cruelty, and now you face the consequences." Thrucknall was executed 3 days later. With his death, the last major defendant had faced judgment. The trials were complete. Then came the part that surprised the galaxy even more than the trials themselves. Ambassador Sarah Chen stood before the Galactic Council once more, this time presenting a comprehensive peace treaty with the Krillian Empire. The treaty included reconstruction aid for damaged Krillian worlds. It proposed trade agreements favorable to both sides. It established cultural exchange programs and joint scientific initiatives. It even included human assistance in rebuilding the Krillian military as a defensive force, rather than an aggressive one. "You fought them for 40 years, Elder Vrath said, confused. "Now you offer them friendship?" "We fought their government and the individuals who committed crimes," Sarah corrected. "We have no quarrel with the Krillian people. They were victims of their leadership's decisions as much as we were. Now that justice has been served, we can build something better." The treaty was signed on Earth in the same city where Zixthar had first tried to understand humans. Commander Vexlar, now representing the new Krillian government, stood beside Sarah as they placed their marks on the document. "Why?" Vexlar asked quietly. "Why offer us so much when you could demand everything?" "Because peace built on humiliation never lasts," Sarah explained. "We wanted justice, not revenge. Justice has been served. Now we work toward ensuring this never happens again." The Galactic Council formally adopted what became known as the Human Doctrine. It established new standards for warfare, protections for civilians, accountability for war crimes, and the principle that actions must have consequences regardless of political convenience. Not every species adopted it immediately, but it became the standard by which others were judged. Zixthar wrote his final report on the human question. It ran over 1,000 pages, but the conclusion was simple. Humans were neither uniquely peaceful nor uniquely warlike. They were uniquely principled. They would endure any hardship for what they believed was right. But once those principles were satisfied, they became the most generous species in the galaxy. 5 years after the peace treaty, a memorial was unveiled on Earth. It listed every human and Krillian who had died in the war, soldiers and civilians alike from both sides. The names stretched for miles, carved into black stone that reflected the sky above. Sarah Chen stood at the memorial's dedication ceremony beside Vexlar. Above them, human and Krillian children played together, attending the same schools, learning each other's languages, growing up in a galaxy that their parents had bled to change. "Was it worth it?" Vexlar asked, looking at the endless names of the dead. Sarah was quiet for a long time. "Ask me in 100 years when these children are old and no one has repeated the mistakes that led to this. If we succeeded in changing how the galaxy thinks about war and peace, then yes, every name here will have meant something. And if we failed, then we failed trying to make things better. That still counts for something." They stood together in silence, two former enemies united by shared loss and shared hope. The galaxy continued turning, carrying forward the lessons written in blood and carved in stone. That peace without justice was merely a pause, that principles mattered more than convenience, and that sometimes the hardest path was the only one worth taking. Above the memorial, a human child asked a Krillian child what the names meant. The Krillian child, whose great-grandparents had fought in the war, answered simply, "They mean we remember." They mean we do better. And in the space between stars, in chambers where civilizations met to discuss the future, delegates from 100 worlds quietly reconsidered what they thought they knew about war, peace, and the strange species called humanity, who had refused to accept the galaxy as it was and demanded something better.